Good morning, guys. Well, actually, it probably won't be morning when I post this, but I wanted to get on today and film the flip through of the Blossman Route, A River of Voices, the history of the United States. This history program is new. It came out, I believe, this past winter. Volume 1 came out, and Volume 2 is supposed to come out sometime, I believe, spring of 2021. And I think there will be 3 volumes total of the U.S. history program from Blossom and Root. But what makes this history program pretty unique is that a lot of time was spent making sure that it was a very integrated history. But I wanted to come on and just do this flip through for you guys so you could kind of see what it looks like, what you use, kind of how the lessons are set up, to see if it's something that would work for your family. I'm pretty excited about it. We love U.S. history. We live in Virginia, and we're surrounded by history here. Our neighbors happens to be a plantation where James Madison was born. George Washington was born in the next county over. His boyhood home is also located here. Just lots and lots of early history and things located right around us so that we can take our kids on field trips. We can see things. I find with young kids, getting to be the places that history took place kind of makes it easier for them to grasp. So we're excited just from that standpoint to take lots of field trips and things while we're doing this. But let me move on back to the history program. So it is called A River of Voices. I didn't have the parent manual printed. I use our Kindle for a lot of things, so I have it on here, and then this, you also get a file of clickable links to use during different lessons. So I have that on here too, so that while we're doing our lessons, I can just click the link and go right to where we need to be. But because I don't have this printed, sometimes it's kind of hard to see on the Kindle through the camera. So I went ahead and printed some of the beginning pages of the parent guide so that we could kind of look at that today. But anyways, so this is the student notebook that I had printed. You get a student notebook, and it's just basically where each lesson they'll get a prompt to, whether it's a writing activity, draw a picture. Sometimes they'll have little map activities. I debated whether or not I was going to print it because they keep journals anyways for science and different things. I like them. I don't like to box them in with what they can record from what they thought was important about that activity. So we'll do this, but we'll also probably use their own journals in conjunction, whatever they choose to do, whatever they found important from the lesson. But I got each of my kids, so I have 3 kids, but my youngest is 3, so he's not doing history with us. My 11-year-old, who's a rising 6th grader, will be doing this history program with us, and my rising 3rd grader, who is 8, will be doing it. So they each have that, and then it comes with a book of centuries. When I printed through Lulu Express, it wanted me to upload a cover. Blossom and Root, this is the cover that comes with the program, and they do that so that the kids can decorate it themselves. But because this was going to be printed and I knew they wouldn't be able to necessarily go on and decorate it, plus my kids just, I don't know, I knew they wouldn't. I just threw together a little cover of my own, but this is their book of centuries. And we'll be able to use this throughout all the levels, so they can use this as their timeline. So they each have one of those. So that's sort of what comes with the program. You get the parent guide, the book of centuries, the student notebook, and the file with the clickable links. And then there is also, with the standard pathway, which is the pathway we chose, they now recommend the use of this book, but it is not a book for children. And I'll go ahead and talk about that right now. There's mature content in here, so it is recommended, and there's several spots in here where they have noted to read this and to use your judgment, whether you want to use it as a read aloud, that you may not want to just hand this to your kids and have them read it themselves, depending on their age. I did find there are photos in here, graphic photos of lynchings and hangings and lots of other things. So they are in black and white, but they are still pretty graphic. So definitely use your judgment. But there is an option with the standard pathway that if you are uncomfortable using this and you would prefer, there is another book that they use for the gentle pathway that you can use instead. And so there is another file that comes when you buy the River of Voices package that allows, it gives you sort of the guide to use the other book instead if you want to. But I think that's everything that comes in the package. So let's move on. I'm going to go through a little bit of the parent guide with you guys. And then after that, I've got all of the spines for the standard pathway. So I'll do a little flip through of those too, just so you can kind of see what they look like. But like I have been saying, we're doing the standard pathway, just because the standard pathway, and I'll go over that, is grades 3 through 8, I believe. And so I'll have a 3rd grader and a 6th grader. So that's just what we're going to do. But let's go through this a little bit. So a River of Voices. And the first thing that they do is they go through the different ways that you can schedule the lessons. So you can do a traditional schedule that covers 36 weeks. You can do a schedule for if you don't want to do it for the whole year and you want to do your U.S. history in a semester. You can do it in 18 weeks. I know some people like to do U.S. history and world. And then I know there's some people that like to do history for part of the year and science for part of the year, or even alternate weeks. We do cover, we'll probably do this, we'll do the 36-week layout, and we alternate our science and history weekly. So we won't cover world history this year. The only time we'll maybe come across world history is in other subjects. But, so you can do the 36 weeks, the 18 weeks, and then there's a relaxed schedule for people who just don't want to be on a schedule. So now, we'll go into how to teach the curriculum. And it says that the curriculum is designed to provide support and inspiration to the parent educator. Above all else, please make it yours. So we were introduced to Blossom and Root through the early years, the preschool. And the thing I like about it is it's more of a guide. It tells you, how to do it and gives you all the information, but it's sort of yours to make it what you want. So step 1 is to absorb the material. Step 2, explore the material through hands-on, visual projects. And step 3, to record, and that's where their book of centuries will come in, and their student notebooks, and whatever else you decide to do with your child. And then I'll cover that part in just a second. But so step 1, gathering perspectives. And this is where not only do they break this up into pathways for different age levels, but they also set it up for the different ways different families teach. So you have the minimalists, so people who just like to briefly cover these subjects. The book basket folks who like to do lots and lots of reading, then the visual learners. And I think my family probably falls between the minimalists and the visual learners. We do some reading. We typically only like to do one read aloud at a time, though. So it can get hard for us to have a read aloud for every subject we're doing. My kids are very, very visual. They like YouTube videos, documentaries. I've mentioned Curiosity Stream in my other videos. We love Curiosity Stream. It's like Netflix for documentaries. And so I need to go through and I want to make a list of any documentaries they have that might go with our history program this year. So, but you're also provided with lots of links, and that's where the little clickable link file will come in handy. So, you can choose, and you're not stuck. Like if I choose minimalist one week, it doesn't mean that I can't the next week decide we're going to be visual or pick a little from each. So, and then we might be on a certain topic that we really, really are into, and we might want to fall into this category and read lots and lots about it. So that's nice that it's sort of not one way fits all. You can see where it fits for your family. Okay, so step 2, explore and inquire. And this step, it says, this is where the hands-on activities will come in. It says mix and match, choose your own, whatever your kids like to do. And this is where I will probably sometimes have one child doing one thing and another doing a separate. My daughter likes to write, whereas my son likes to draw. So where one might be drawing or doing like a scrapbook type thing, the other might choose to write. So we'll, mix and match depending on what each child likes to do. Step 3, this is recording. This is where they can write down all of the things. And back here, a lot of these projects that I was looking through and seeing are going to come right from some of their spines. And that's where we'll probably do lots and lots of field trips this year, assuming that everything opens back up. But for the record, there's oral narration, written narration, scrapbooking, timeline. And I have one child who does like to do more. He's a reluctant reader. He does like to write, but he doesn't like to write long things. So sometimes if he has a big old story to tell, he'll do an oral narration, and I might dictate some of his stuff down in his journal. And then my daughter, she's a writer. So we'll probably, depending on the topic, decide how we want to record that week. And then this gets into the different pathways that I've been talking about, choosing a pathway. So the general pathway is recommended for K through 2 and more sensitive learners. So even if your child is a little bit older, but you feel like maybe some of the historical topics are going to be a little too heavy, or maybe they just don't enjoy history that much, or it's not a topic that they really love, so you want to kind of do a more gentle pathway with them, that's where you would fit. And then there's the standard pathway for grades 3 through 8. That's what we're going to be doing. And if there are certain lessons where I feel like my 3rd grader might need an easier pathway, this gives me the ability to sort of teach family style. So I can teach how each individual kid needs to learn the same lesson. So I really appreciate that, because our history and science are done, and our nature studies, that's all family lessons. We do that together. So then you also have the advanced pathway here, and that's for grades 7 and up, as well as parents. So if you want to come in and you want to learn with your child, this is where the pathway that you would follow. And then, of course, like I said, there's going to be several times in here where you're going to see where they definitely recommend that you screen all resources carefully. Not all of them will be appropriate for all learners and all families. So this is where you really need to come in with the different things. And like for the standard pathway, this is one of those resources. You've got to come in and go through it yourself, and make sure that it's something you're comfortable with for your family and your children. Then there is the permission to go off grid. And this is in a lot of the Blossom and Root programs. And this is just permission to stray away from what it says in here and dig deeper, follow a rabbit trail. We do this a lot. We bounce around, and if the kids just discover something they're super interested in, we'll end up watching documentaries and reading books and following that little trail until we've exhausted it and then come back to where we were supposed to be. So sometimes things take us longer than they're laid out to, but that's okay. And there's permission here to go off grid. We have part 1, the first European colonies, part 2, the growing colonies, part 3, the Revolutionary War, and part 4, building the foundation for a new nation. And so the last lesson will be on the Bill of Rights. And then we're going to get into where they talk a little bit about the different pathways and the resources and materials you'll need. So I'll just briefly go through this because this is public knowledge, the books that you need for each pathway. So I'll cover that briefly. So the Gentle Pathway, you'll use a kid's guide to Native American history, a kid's guide to Latino history, and a child's introduction to African American history. And there are also some notes in here where they do say, like, a note regarding a kid's guide to Native American history, and that the spine uses words like Indian and Native American interchangeably. However, Native people use a variety of words for themselves. Most do not like just Indian. Terms like American Indian, Native American, Native, Native peoples, and Indigenous are all acceptable terms. So, Blossom and Root also provides some resources for the parents, books and links, so that you can educate yourself on how to educate your children on proper terminology and how to have those discussions with them. So, standard pathway, a kid's guide to Native American history, a kid's guide to Latino history, 1001 things everyone should know about African American history, before Columbus, the Americas of 1491. And as you can see up here, there is the little note about how that resource can be inappropriate for younger learners. And then you have a Revolutionary War spine. And you get several options for that. We chose the American Revolution for Kids, which is the one that they say digs the deepest into the war itself. I chose that one, and I'll show you a little bit about that book. But it went in a little bit about some of the people who were born in Virginia and a lot of things that happened in Virginia. So because we wanted to do lots of field trips, I chose that one so that we could learn a little bit more about those people before we visited, their birth site or their home or what have you. But we will also be utilizing the video option, the Liberty Kids series from PBS. It's on Amazon Prime, and my son is very visual, so I think there'll be times where we might do some reading from here, but then we'll also pull that in. So there's several different options for your Revolutionary War spine. And then for the advanced pathway, a different mirror for young people, a history of multicultural America, a young people's history of the United States, an indigenous people's history of the United States for young people, and then recommended only for parents or high school students at the discretion of their parents would be a queer history of the United States for young people. And so there's definitely lots of options to make this as deep and heavy of a program as you want it to be, and it can also be a very gentle, light program. And then for the parents, a recommendation is Rethinking Columbus, the Next 500 Years. And that is a resource that they say addresses how to teach Columbus and the impact of his arrival in 1492. So there's also a few more resources where I said that to help you with teaching your children some of the misconceptions about Native people and Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims and all of that. So now we've gotten to a lesson, and this, I'm only going to go as far as lesson 1. And I'll briefly just sort of go through this, and then we're going to take a look at the spines. So, lesson 1, Native people of the Northeast. And this is where you'll come in, and you'll find your pathway. So this is the minimalist, gentle, standard, and advanced pathway. You have the book basket, gentle, standard, and advanced. And then you have, for the visual learners, the gentle, lots and lots of links, standard and advanced, some more advanced, some activities to consider, things to do in the student notebook. So that's where, when you're sitting down to plan, you decide whether, you're going to do a very brief lesson and you're going to go into the minimalist and you're just going to pick your standard pathway or wherever you fit. Or maybe that week you want to do visual and you want to go to all these links. So, you come in here and for the visual and you pick your pathway and you read about your lesson, and that's where you can prepare. So that's sort of how the lessons are each broken up. And that's pretty much how the rest of the book goes. There's also other resources when you buy the program, like obviously all the other lessons, but there's also very, very long and in-depth book lists so that you can find lots of read alouds and individual readers for your family. So now I'm going to just do a quick look at some of the books that go with, these are the standard pathway. Some of these are part of the gentle pathway as well. And then for the advanced pathway, you would want these spines as well as the additional 3 that were listed for the advanced pathway. So let's look first. Let me separate this. Just to give you an idea what this book looks like. This is A Kid's Guide to Native American History. And it will come in here, and I just had a couple pages marked in these just to have pages to reference. But like where we live, we're part of the Powhatan, and more specifically, the ones we hear about a lot around here are the Mattaponi. When we go to different state parks, a lot of times they talk about the Mattaponi and the Powhatans on a lot of the boards that give you information about what's happened at that site. So you get your little chapter. You have some reading, and it's not super heavy reading. And then every chapter has lots of different activities that you can come in and do. And my kids definitely think we'll do this one. They like working with clay and pottery. So there's lots of different activities you can choose, and the reading. So that's kind of how this is set up. And then, and we like activities. I like hands-on. That's kind of, I like to set up their hands-on, and they can do that while I do the reading. It helps them to sit still and focus a little bit more on the things I'm saying. So then we have A Kid's Guide to Latino History. And the same thing, you're going to get your reading. And then there's going to be different activities you can do. So then this book, Before Columbus, The Americas of 1491. And the thing I like about this one here is that I felt like the picture quality was just really, really nice. There was a lot of different artwork featured in it. And so I definitely appreciate that, getting to come through here and see. This reminds me sort of the textbooks we had in school. And I can remember when the teacher was talking and being extremely boring, just staring at the pictures and reading, like looking at all the pictures, and I'd read all these little captions, and that's how I passed the time. And then I thought these were neat. My grandfather lives on the river, and these have washed up a lot. So he has lots of these at his house, these little spears. They wash up on his little like beachy area down by his pier. So that's before Columbus, the Americas of 1491. And we have the American Revolution for Kids. This is the Revolutionary War spine that we chose. We're also going to do, like I said, the Liberty Kids series, which is just like little cartoons. But I chose this because, and see, this one also has food. Brew a batch of root beer. And there was like different Boston brown bread and churned butter. And so, like I said, my kids love food. But I liked that this one talked about a lot of the figures, the historical figures who lived around here, were born around here. Like, we've been to the home of the Lees. So here they talk about Richard Henry Lee, and it was his childhood home. And it went on, I think Francis Lightfoot Lee lived there, Robert E. Lee lived there. But I believe it was the boyhood home of Richard Henry Lee. But we've been there to that plantation, and we've toured it, and we've been to some of these other places, but I want to take them to some of the sites for Thomas Jefferson and go to Jamestown. So I just liked that this brought in some of these figures that they've heard their names, but my kids may not necessarily know who they are. So we can come in here and, before we go to those sites, make sure that I've kind of given them a little, at least a brief idea of where we're going and who these people were. So we chose that. And then this one is 1001 Things Everyone Should Know. And I only marked some of the stuff in the beginning because this goes all throughout history, and obviously this course doesn't cover as far into history. I mean, the second and third volume I'm sure will, but we probably will not use the bulk of this book because the bulk of it covers a different historical time, but it looks like a very, very, very good read, and an easy read, even though the content is deep. You're looking at, just chunks where you can just come in and you can pick whatever it is, and it's not a huge, like, you're not reading a chapter on each thing. So that will be easy with using this with kids. You can come in and you can decide which points you want them to know about, and you can just read them that point. So the Great Migrations, Civil Rights and Politics, African Americans in the Military, Culture and Religion, Invention, Space and Medicine, Invention, Science and Medicine, and Sports. So we may pull from all these different categories. Like I said, with this book, I did not mark the pictures, but there are pictures in here, very graphic pictures, and I won't show them in case anybody is sensitive to that, but know that that is in here. There's pictures, graphic pictures of lynchings and hangings, things that you may not want your kids to see. So this may not be a resource you leave out for them to have. This may be something you keep with your things, and you can choose to read to them or hand them the page already bookmarked and have them read aloud. But with my oldest, she's getting closer. She's 6th grade, so she's getting closer to being ready to hear some of the heavy truths and see some of these things, whereas my 3rd grader may not quite be ready. He may not be able to fully grasp all of these things. So there may be times I do a little bit of separate stuff with her. So anyways, those are the books. And hopefully, if you were interested in this curriculum, this definitely was not a brief walkthrough because there was a lot to cover, but hopefully this gives you a better idea of how it is broken down, how you use it to teach. It is not like an open and go curriculum. It's not like a workbook style curriculum. You do come in and you can choose your different pathway and how you want to teach it. It's very versatile. You can change up how you teach from week to week, the lessons you do. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this little brief look into, well, not brief, but this look into A Blossom and Root, A River of Voices. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them below. We have not started using this, so this is just how much I've familiarized myself with, but I will try to do a review after we get a few weeks into, maybe sometime this fall. Come back and do another review of how it's going, maybe a learn with us of this program. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I will be back with more flip throughs over the next couple weeks. Thanks, guys.